Inscryption can be a difficult game if you're just starting out. I mean, it took me a while to start understanding the core mechanics of the game. Here's some tips I would say that really help me, I guess, do a lot better. And they're really rudimentary. So it's really based on the beginning and nothing really due to too specific specific scenarios or anything that usually do end up getting me a good match, a good run, or that result in me winning, and how I'm able to exploit some of the some of the stuff very easily. So the first thing you want to focus on is your card deck build. I think there's primarily 3 types of decks that you can use, I guess. So there's the expensive deck, there's a cheap deck, and then there's a bone deck. An expensive deck refers to a deck that relies on cards that use a lot of sacrifices or a lot of bones, but they have powerful hit points. Cheap refers to a deck that's just based on very low sacrifices. So usually it's cards that only have one blood sacrifice, or maybe 2 bones, or at most 4, and occasionally one with 2 sacrifices. Bone decks refers to just decks that are made up primarily of just bone cards. So the vulture or the possum or stuff like that, it's mostly based on bones. Each deck has its own drawbacks. The expensive deck, well, you mostly rely on goats and sacrificing. For cheap decks, the downside would be that you're very susceptible to dud cards, is what I call them, which are basically just cards that are basically useless or worthless whenever you're playing a match. And then the bone deck is, well, obvious drawback is you don't have enough bones to put down certain cards. Although there's these 3 types of decks, it doesn't mean that you have to strictly stick to one. There's obviously going to be mix and matching for each and every single one of those decks, but typically a person's deck will lean towards one of those 3. The main one I'll be focusing on though would be cheap decks, because it's probably the one I use the most. I know how to use it, it works out really well for me, so I'm just going to focus on that. So the first thing you want to do to make a really strong deck is to just mainly focus on getting cards that are basically just cheap. And you want to try your best to stay with cheap cards. But if you really want to increase your card's utility, besides just having a cheap deck that'll let you use the cards whenever you want, you're going to want to look for specific sigils for each of those cards. There's 4 main ones that I like to look at, and that's the poison sigil, the unkillable sigil, the triple or double strike sigil, and the little maturing cycle sigil. Those 4 are probably one of the best ones that you can get. And I mean, I think unkillable is probably the best one. Some secondary ones that you should look out for are item bag sigils, the magpie sigil, stink, and the leader sigil. Those ones are really good, especially if you combine them with dud cards. I mean, the best one you could probably do would be Mantis God plus Unkillable, which is my favorite combination because it basically almost guarantees a win. The last thing you'd want to do to make your deck really strong would be to just gain the game board gimmicks, the campfires and stuff. You'll always get them every run, so you want to utilize them to their fullest. So the best ones you always want to look out for are campfires, the combination ones, the Bone Lord Sacrifice, the Mycologist, the totems if you're on story mode, and the little paint canvas if you're on Casey's mod. Key to this entire deck is the combination of the sigils. If you can get a lot of combinations and good ones too, you'll probably be unstoppable. But there are some gimmicks that you want to avoid. The trapper spot, cave beast area, totem battles, item bags if your items are full. I mean, overall, these requirements won't go perfectly. There's going to be times where you have to choose between the lesser of 2 evils, or even go down a risky path to improve your cards, but it's ultimately your decision, and you kind of have to play it smart and think, what is it worth risking it or not? And then when it comes to just battle knowledge, you kind of just have to play a lot to understand. I mean, for every instance, there's a whole bunch of different plays you can make. when you play enough of it and you get enough wins and you lose enough, you start to figure out what exactly your play style is. And you understand what's a bad play and what's not, and you just gotta play a lot to understand and get the rhythm of it. And of course, there's more than just these simple things like card decks and gimmicks. And overall, this is just the pattern and things that I do in order to play a lot of these matches and how I do my best to succeed. Of course, it's not perfect. There's a whole bunch of different types of decks that you can build, certain patterns, whatever cards you think are good. It just all relies on you playing the game and figuring out what works best for you. You just gotta practice and learn. And eventually you'll get it.